You are listening to the People-Centric Podcast, where we talk through the toughest challenges that people face at work and give practical advice to fixing those challenges. Thanks for joining our movement to create workplaces that are happier, healthier, aligned, and empowered by putting people at the center of all that we do.
Hey, people-centric leaders. We brought our entire team onto this call today because we felt like you needed a little bit of inspiration. We could feel like you're driving to work this morning and you're just like a little bit dragged behind. And maybe it's the world, maybe it's the headlines, maybe you've been watching the news, maybe something didn't turn out the way you wanted it to go. Maybe you feel like you're a victim of your job or the circumstances around you or all the things that are happening to you. Like, we get it. There's a lot of people feeling that way right now. The world is full of anxious, excited people who are just wondering, like, what's the future look like? And so we wanted to bring you a little inspiration to give you maybe a different way of thinking about yourself, your place in the world, and to give you a little bit of power that actually is not ours to give you, that you've actually had all along, on how you can make an impact on those around you. So we're going to kick this one off with our own Bethany Taft, who has assured us very confidently.
We lost your sound. Don, we lost your
Your
sound.
sound stopped.
We're gonna start over. Dang it. Or we can just edit this out.
When did you lose me?
When you said very
right.
confidently.
Okay. All right. So we're going to kick this off to Bethany Taft, who is going to read this quote for you, who told us very confidently that she was able to read this quote for us. So she is going to read this quote. Bethany's got a bit of a theater background, so I'm not trying to raise the bar for her right now, but she's going to read this quote for all of you. So just everybody, just, if you're driving, you may want to just pull over for a second and really embrace what's about to happen. Cause yeah, this is going to be good. Ready? Go ahead, Bethany.
Oh my gosh, so much pressure. Okay, so this is a quote by George Bernard Shaw. We actually just heard about it on a different video that we found on Instagram, because that's our source of all knowledge these days. But let's read this quote. So it says, "This is the true joy in life, to be used for a purpose recognized by yourself as a mighty one, to be a force of nature instead of a feverish, selfish little clot of ailments and grievances, complaining that the world will not devote itself to making you happy. I am of the opinion that my life belongs to the whole community, and that as long as I live, it is my privilege to do for it whatever I can. I want to be thoroughly used up when I die, for the harder I work, the more I live. I rejoice in life for its own sake. Life is no brief candle to me. It is a sort of splendid torch, which I've got a hold of for a moment, and I want to make it burn as brightly as possible before handing it on to future generations."
Bravo,
Thank you.
Bethany. Great
Thank you
job.
so much. I appreciate that.
Fantastic job. I could see the theater background. I could feel it. That was very, very, very good. So we really like that quote from George Bernard Shaw. Again, and you can find that, and you can find an Instagram video of Jeff Goldblum kind of paraphrasing it and getting through that. But so we're going to talk about, let's break this down a little bit. Like, what does this mean for our team? Why are we even talking about this quote?
Well, things are tough out there right now, Don. I don't know if you knew, but I think, for our whole team, hearing this yesterday and as we were looking at it, I think it was just this acknowledgement that, like, the world feels really divided in a lot of ways right now. I think it's easy to kind of point fingers at what's wrong. And we really like this quote, that it just really kind of felt like, hey, we're bringing it together, and that, like, those small but mighty actions really do make a difference in how I choose to live my life, how I choose to play a role in my community really does make a difference. And then I think it also taps into, like, some of our people-centric philosophy of how we lead our team and how we work with our clients. So yeah, that's my beginning of the take.
Yeah. And I'll expand on that. I think I have been
in a place kind of wondering where my place in the world is. I go through this phase every few years. It's a whole deal. But we have the phrase in our office, and we say it's team, client, community. And we're going to support our team, we're going to support our client, we're going to support our community in that order. And I also had just finished reading the book The Small and the Mighty by Sharon McMahon. It's 12 people who are not generally recognized in the course of history, but did something small, and it was very mighty for the movement of America. And I'm struck by, what does it mean to be in a community? What is one's community? And how do you make an impact? How can you be small and mighty? And so I just was thinking about all of these things. And then I saw this quote and I was like, man, wouldn't it be cool if we talked about this on our podcast and just unpacked it a little bit? So that was where my head was on it.
Yeah, I love that. So like when we think about small and mighty or large and mighty, like if you ask people in a room, and we do this a lot, we'll talk about leaders, we'll say, what do you think of when you think of a leader? And people will typically name really big named people. I think of Steve Jobs, or I think of Jack Welch, or I think of like Elon Musk or something. And they'll name like really, really big names and famous people who are leaders. And then one of the things that we try to point out is that if we define leadership as influence, which is how we define leadership, because it's the most useful definition of leadership, then we all influence each other on a day-to-day basis. So what's the difference between the loud leaders and the soft leaders, or the big leaders and the small leaders? What's the difference between those two things? And does a loud leader make a bigger impact on the world than a soft leader does?
I think one of the main differences that I will notice between like maybe that like influential, gentle leader, like that gentle influence, versus like the leader that's more like pushing their agenda, they're pushing what they want to see happen, trying to get people to just follow what they're doing, is that influential leader generally works on like a praise and affirmation basis. So they're acknowledging what the strengths of each person are that make what we want to do possible. They're highlighting like what's going well and what's working with the team, like how each person plays their part to make this bigger picture come together, essentially, versus that more like, I'll call it like the authoritarian leader, is they kind of motivate based on like fear and punishment a lot of times. We're like, if you don't do this, then this will happen, or because we didn't get this completely right, then this is the consequence. And they focus more on like, honestly, like some of the negative or where we were lacking, versus look how much we have and look how much we could do, and let's look at like all the gifts and talents and things that are at the table.
Yeah, you're making me think. I just watched the movie Flamin' Hot. I don't know if anybody's seen that movie, but it's a really, really good people-centric-y kind of movie. I think we've talked about it a little bit before, but it's the idea. It's from Frito-Lay when they were really struggling, and it's based on a true story. A person who was working as a janitor inside Frito-Lay basically came up with the idea of Flamin' Hot Cheetos and the whole Flamin' Hot brand, and had to take extraordinary steps, obviously as a frontline janitor, to get it all the way up to the CEO to be able to make the product and sell it and be able to prove it. And it ended up being $1 billion brand for Frito-Lay. But in the movie, there's some scenes where you think about him trying to get this product elevated. He has the idea, and it's not like he just says the idea and everybody's like, yes, that's the idea. He's got multiple barriers that he has to overcome. The first of which is he has to call the CEO and say, hey, I've got an idea. You asked if anybody had an idea, and I've got an idea, and I'm trying to get to the CEO. And there's a moment where the CEO's admin takes the call and has to decide, am I going to forward this to the CEO or not? And the admin, instead of just sort of like kind of stand back and like playing gatekeeper, like listens to him a little bit and takes a moment and pauses and decides, yeah, I'm actually going to forward this call. I'm actually going to forward this call. There were lots of also other examples in the movie where he would get frustrated and a coworker would just give him a little bit of a push or a little bit of a motivation or things like that. I think that's what we're talking about. Like we see that as a community on a regular basis. We give each other gentle nudges of influence every single day. And those nudges create real impacts to us that are hard for us to be able to even sometimes quantify, but can ultimately make things successful. If that admin had not passed on that phone call, we would never get to taste Flamin' Hot Cheetos, and that person would still be a janitor, which that's a travesty. That would just be, I don't even know. I can't even imagine that world. I had some for lunch yesterday. They're delicious. They're really, really good. They do stain your fingers, but they're very tasty.
Yeah, I don't know exactly where we were going with the flame. I mean, I do. I love it. I love Flamin' Hot Cheetos. But now I'm thinking about food, and you can't do that to us, Don. You know, there's several people on here that once you get us thinking about food, we've derailed. We've derailed hard.
And we're very food motivated people.
So food motivated.
So,
But I love that story because it is just like the little stuff. And I think a lot of times, me included, when we think about our place in the world and what a community is and how to be small and mighty, you start thinking you have to do something big. I have to do something big, right? I have to make Flamin' Hot Cheetos. I'm not Flamin' Hot Cheetos. That's not my jam. I'm not going to figure that out. But I could do something else. And I think people get stuck in their head that they have to go do this grand gesture or this very big thing, when really that admin is just as important to the story as the end of the story, right? The people who nudged him along the way, the people that said, like, you're doing great, the CEO that said, if you guys have any ideas, call me. Like, those little things are just as important to the story as the big end goal. And I think it's all the little things that add up along the way that make things big and amazing. And so I love that that's out there.
it's almost too bad, like in business school, that they spend so much time on case studies. Because whenever you see case studies in business school, they always talk about it like it's never like how it really happened. It's like, well, Frito-Lay was given a challenge and they had to figure out how they were going to overcome the challenge. So they developed this Flamin' Hot brand to be able to target a different demographic. And it really took off for them. It became $1 billion. And that's like the case study in business, but that's not what really happened. What really happened was a slew of people who had to decide how they wanted to lead each other in moments, and formed a community that wanted to save itself and listen to itself, and a CEO who was humble enough in just a moment to ask for help from their people, and somebody's courage to be able to say, no, I'm going to encourage you to continue to do this, or pass on that phone call, or do those things. Those are moments that we have every day in life, but we don't think of those. In the quote, it says to be a force of nature. Is that really being a force of nature, to push along a call or encourage somebody in a difficult moment? Is that a force of nature?
It depends on the day for me. Some days, yeah, that's tough.
When is Diana royalty not a force of nature? I feel like as a whole, maybe you're not the best example of that, but I feel like a shroud of blackness whooshes, and then that's when you know Diana royalty has been there. It's like a small bomb cyclone, but anyway.
Well, I think that the question that you're asking, Don, because like if we go back to the beginning of the quote, so it says it's the true joy in life to be used for a purpose recognized by yourself as a mighty one, to be a force of nature. And I just think that most of us don't think of ourselves in that way. So I don't think that I would think of myself as a force of nature in this way necessarily. But I think if it's reframed to say like, hey, do you actually have some influence in the world in just relationships from person to person? Yeah, probably so. But like we were saying, is like, it's probably more quiet than it is like loud and in your face, right? I just don't think a lot of us recognize the power in that, and how important and valuable that is. That doesn't mean that we win everybody over, that we make everybody think the way that we think. I just think it's in like how, and by the way, like I think actually a lot of people are not effective at that too, right? Like I think people can be a force of nature in their influence, but like in the wrong way. Like they can push people the other direction, but to like recognize that as like an opportunity, as like a moment between like, if I have a lot of influence in a relationship with one person, what would that actually look like? To say, I don't have to win you over, but what if I like you use the term like nudge? What if I like nudged them just a little bit, or made them or had the opportunity to help them think about something a little bit differently, and not got defensive if they didn't like that direction? What if I tried to create some perspective for somebody in a moment, but then you know what, I might not see the end result or something that changed in that person. And so I think then we don't connect ourselves to being a force of nature in that way. So I don't know, that's what I think of whenever you ask that question.
I totally agree with that. And I love what you said, Bethany. And it reminded me of like a quote I came across earlier this year. And I'm not going to get it 100% right because I don't have it in front of me, but it was essentially by an author who said, like, few people, you know, if they think of this concept of time travel, like when you read that in books or you remember the movie Back to the Future, it's they're so worried about every little thing they're going to touch, you know, and travel to the past or travel to the future that would impact something really big. And we think about that in like this hypothetical, but very few people think about in their everyday life, like what are those small things that might make a really huge difference in somebody's life in the future? And where do I really have maybe some influence? Or even if you don't feel like you have influence, like where do I have trust with people that I could maybe like say that small thing or do that small thing that could really change their lives? Because I think we can all probably think about different moments in our lives where somebody did something small that they probably don't even remember doing. They don't even remember saying, like the compliment that you got on like a really bad day that like kind of maybe even saved your life in certain ways, made you have like renewed hope for something. And so I think, yeah, we discount ourselves a lot here for the influence that we do have. And I think we do get too focused on just this, like, I've got to be everything I have to do 100%, and I have to do all of these big things. And I was even having a conversation with a friend recently where she's got some people in her life that are really struggling, and she was getting super burnt out because she was trying to be there to meet every little need and do every little thing and answer every message and, you know, be available to them 24/7, and it was actually like hurting her to do that. And so we just end up having the conversation of like, just like show up when you can and where you can. And that's what's important. You don't have to solve all of the world's problems. You don't have to solve all of the problems, even for everyone in your life, but show up where you can and be that flame. And I think that's what I love about this quote too, where it's just like, I want to be thoroughly used up when I die, for the harder I work, the more I live, and I rejoice in life for its sake. Of like, no, that doesn't mean that you work yourself to death or you burn your candle out to light someone else's. It's saying that like there's enough light here for all of us. And I know there are some days you're going to need a little bit of my light and I'm going to need a little bit of yours. And so we all just need to like do the small thing and show up when we can and where we can.
I was thinking, this is our holiday season episode. And for me, and, whatever your background, very respectfully, one of my favorite parts of this year is a candlelight service. So wherever I am, I try to go to one, even if I'm traveling. And there's a moment when you share that light from like one candle to the other, especially if, 5 little candles get together at the same time and they're all lit. It makes a little torch. And I don't think it's accidental that this quote kind of refers to life is not a candle. If it was, it's probably a life of like just the solo one. But you put many together and that makes much more of a torch. And kind of some of this, one of our favorite presentations, mine is at least for activities we do. We have one group session where within the presentation, talking about your leadership, we ask you, what are 3 or 4 things that you want people to say about you when you're no longer around? And that could mean when you're not a part of the team. And it also just means when you're gone. I think our question is, what do you want people to say at your funeral? Which is what a lovely Christmas idea. And I'm probably cheating. My dad's grave site is actually between my house and our office. So I actually think of my dad every day I drive to work. And on his tombstone, one word that was written, and he was probably the single best leader and most important person in my life to this point, was the word builder. My dad's name was Bob. He built houses. He was legally blind. He shouldn't have done it. He had diseases. All these things that really should have prevented dad from doing it. But still, when I go back home to the county I grew up in Colorado, there's still these really old school builders, men and women, who will say, "Whoa, your dad," and then they fill in the blank. And so he definitely was not a candle. I wouldn't say he was also the like amazing example of a torch, but a blind man who built houses, and he did it with other people. And he did more than that too. Like he built houses. He truly did build that community, that Jeff Goldblum quote in it. So I think it's what a gift that whatever it is that we're building, I would say everyone is building something somewhere. And that's so much of what we get to do. And then the last part, that alignment of your beginning of if you actually believe that your life has a force to it, it may not be the mightiest force, but that idea of influence, that means you have something that acts on things around you. And if you lose sight of that, you just become less of yourself. So yeah, the encouragement, influence is there. It's in your hands. You can use it.
You know, one of the great lies in business and organizations is this idea of empowerment, that you have to wait till somebody comes and empowers you. If only my job was right, even if my boss was just the right person, if somebody would just come and ask me, I could make a bigger influence on the world. If I was just at a different spot, if I had a different position, if I was just a little bit more famous, if I had a different spouse, if I lived in a better community, if the right party got elected at the last election, whatever that thing is, and we're waiting for like the stars to align so that suddenly we're empowered. And what we're telling you and what we have seen over and over again is you already have all of the power that you need. And you get to use that power on a day-to-day basis. And as Diana said, maybe it's not always in the loudest of ways, but you choose how you influence other people on a day-to-day basis. And you get to plug it in and you get to decide, how do I want to use this? Do I want to use this to encourage others? Do I want to use this to spread despair? I loved the language in that quote, to be a force of nature instead of a feverish, selfish little clod of ailments and grievances, complaining that the world will not devote itself to making you happy. That's not like mincing words. Those are pretty strong words. And you know what? And we've all been there. I have been a feverish, selfish little cloud of ailments and grievances, complaining that the world will not devote itself to making me happy. I've done that before. I see all of us nodding on those calls. When you say it like that, you're like, well, I don't want to be that. I don't want to be that. I want to be a force. I want to be a force of nature. I want to be the drop of rain that falls down in the valley in Arizona that creates the Grand Canyon. Like I want to have that. So how do you do that? Like, how do you become the force of nature? How do you discover your own power? How do you discover your own light?
I don't think you can do it by yourself is maybe the first part of that. Yeah, like a single drop does not make the Grand Canyon. A single candle does not make a torch. But I think what we always talk about, the practice and preaching of why alignment matters and why empowerment matters, why I would say there's a movement of people doing these things we talk about, is because you can't do it alone. Ergo community. And so I would say a lot of it is finding your place and your gifts and your skills in it, knowing what that internal force is for you, but then connecting that and floating ideas out to find others like you and building a wider and wider circle. At least that's what I would say it is for me.
I like that. Yeah, I like that. I would add on to that I think that it's like focus on the things that you can do, and don't worry about other people. We always talk about like the fact that like you can't control everybody else in every other situation, but like focus on the things that you can do and you can change. This reminds me of like that little part of the quote. It reminds me of often whenever we've worked with so many different people who the story is, and maybe in coaching situations or groups, a whole department, even maybe we're coming in and we're working with them and they're upset about stuff and they don't like what's going on and they feel like they're being treated unfairly. And maybe that's all true, but it's so self-focused. And I think there have been so many times that I've sat in like a coaching session with somebody where it was like, okay, if that's the direction that you want to go, if your goal is to satisfy yourself, then maybe this is not the right thing for you. Then maybe you're justified in saying, you should leave and find somebody who is going to serve you and make you happy and meet all of your needs. And that's fine. Or you could step back and say, what kind of legacy do you want to leave at this organization that you can impact and change? So is it about proving your own value in a place, or is it about helping raise and lift other people up in that place, and how much of a value you do actually provide that you're not focused on? It's just reframing that perspective there and knowing like you can't change people, but you can change yourself.
Yeah, I want to read another quote from Ayn Rand, and it's from the book Atlas Shrugged, which is one of my favorite books. And it almost initially on the surface, it sounds counter to the first quote. So I'm going to read this and we're going to talk about this. But Bethany, I think it goes directly to what you said. The quote is, it's kind of a slogan that people say in the book a lot. Is what I'll just say it that way. I don't want to spoil the book, but it's I swear by my life and my love of it that I will never live for the sake of another person, nor ask another person to live for mine. I'm paraphrasing from the book there to try to bring that into modern times. So I'll read it again. I swear by my life and my love of it that I will never live for the sake of another person, nor ask another person to live for mine. Like, how does that fit with this idea of community? Because that sounds like a very selfish perspective. And like Bethany, like you were sharing, like you might decide, okay, well, I want to go find the perfect job for me, and I want to be selfish, and I want to try to align the rest of my life so that then I can unleash my power. But then this is kind of saying like, then that is that the right thing to do? Does that fit with community? Is that anti-community?
I think what you're sort of asking is like, is it hard? Is it okay to be selfish and still be part of a community? And like, is it a sacrifice to give up to your community? Right. I think, is that kind of what you're asking? Like,
Yeah, I think so. Yeah. Is it selfish? Are you selfish or part of a community?
yeah. Yeah. And I think the answer is both and, right? Like when you give to your community, you're still getting something from that. Like there is no unselfish act. And when you do things like that, it improves your community, which improves you and the quality of your life. And I also think that both of these quotes make this giving sound very big. It makes it sound, they use like sacrifice and devotion and these really big words, when really I think if you just wave to a neighbor down the street, like that's giving to your community, right? That's enhancing where you are. That's changing someone's day. That just doing something that little is devoting yourself to your community in my mind. And so when we say those words like devotion and sacrifice and what else does he say? Like recognized by yourself as a mighty one, right? These, all the little things make it possible to be mighty. All the little things make it possible to change a community. And so I think it's important to remember that, yes, being a part of your community is going to improve your life, and there is not one way without it. If you are not part of your community, you are diminishing your life around you.
I think, well, just when I think of it, I have had my moments of being a selfish little clot, as they quote, right? When you're just like so self-turned in and so focused on you. And I think for me, at least most of my life, if I spend 80% of my time or whatever percentage of my time thinking about my things and my issues and my situations, it genuinely leads to good outcomes, right? Like it impacts my goals and my bank account does this or my trip does this and that. But when I take 20% of my time and I put that into the group or the community or thinking of others, whether that's waving at my neighbor to supporting my team, so to supporting our client, it always leads, for me at least, to more than 20% of my satisfaction or my outcome. I feel like there's something about, and I think that's the compounding effect of empowerment. When you do it with other people, at least in my experience, you always get more than you really put in. I've not been burned so far, I think maybe, but there's something about it. It's like a building force. I think that's why it's called a force. And again, while this analogy of fire is used, because it's a spreading thing. You get more than you initially had. And so I think a blend of those is probably how most of us function. I don't think any of us are 100% altruistic, all others motivated. But to your question too, Don, I love the idea that it's actually better for me when I do it also. A better community, a better client, and a better team. All I think make me better through the failures and successes of getting to better. I'm better for it.
Mm-hmm. That's good. I think it's that sort of like what's on the other side of it that we just like don't always see the value in that moment. And I feel like, so this reminds me, I feel like I've been reading several books in the last like year or two about like hospitality and just kind of like the art of like welcoming people in your home too, which is like sort of a lost art in some ways. just because of our digital interconnectedness. And so it's something that people don't do as often now. And so I think there's also people that are trying to like encourage that and help you see like, what does this look like and how can you do it well and why would you do this and what's the value of it and like all of those things. And so I just think that like that's something that like we're butting up against too in society right now too. And so like very practically thinking about how we're trying to do some of this in our home now, in some different areas. And so, and there's always this part of me when we do this where I'm that just like wants to fight up against it and wants to be like, I don't want to do this. And this feels really uncomfortable. And I don't really want to have to clean my house. And I don't want to welcome all these people in, and it's probably going to be awkward, and then we're going to have to set this up, and then we're going to have to clean again, and it's like I'm getting so focused on like these things instead of being able to like sit back and think about like, what if when the people like thinking about the people who are actually going to come into my home and the things that might be going on in their world and what they might need and how I can set an environment for people that's actually like impactful to them and sort of helps kind of meet a need that they have in their life right now. Not to put all the pressure on myself that I can solve it for them, but to just create an environment that says like, hey, I'm thinking of you and I want you to feel seen. That's, you know what I mean? And then I think that it's like, if I can, what happens every single time that we've done this, where it's like, I have then gotten over myself and we welcome people into our space. And then after they leave, I'm always like, that was so good. Like, that was so awesome to just like have that time and to have this connection with people and to continue to build relationships with people and just to ask questions and just to eat together. And all of this stuff is like, it's so good, but it's sometimes hard to kind of like see the other side of it, to your point, I think, Philip.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, sorry, Don. I was gonna say, it just reminded me of something that we will say often, even in some of our presentations. If you've ever heard us speak somewhere, is like great leaders are constantly thinking about how to make themselves and others more powerful. And so, yeah, like to tie this back to just like leadership of your team at work, it's like to what everyone's been saying, there is like nothing is perfectly altruistic, but also, yeah, you're probably not 100% selfish either. And great leaders are focused on like, hey, when I am better and I better understand my strengths and how I lead and what my weaknesses are, then I can better lead my team and be focused on helping them grow in their strengths and becoming more powerful in those ways.
Yeah. And just to highlight that, the 5 people on this call right here working with you and your company can make more of an impact on your company than any other consulting firm in the country and in the world, probably, because our approach includes you. Not because we are so awesome. It is because we are awesome, but also because we include your light into what we do along with our light, which I think I want to add one more thing, and then we'll kind of close this episode up. But I think the one selfish thing that you can do is to not share your light with the world, is to hold it back because you're too afraid or because it's inconvenient or it's too difficult or it's too hard or whatever those things are. And like, I get it. We've all not done that. So don't hear judgment in that statement, but it kind of goes back to the famous Teddy Roosevelt comment or quote, the daring greatly. It's the like if you put your light out and you fail, then at least you fail daring greatly so that your place is never amongst those cold and timid souls who know neither victory nor defeat. Right. There's that idea. And I want to do one more quote from Ayn Rand to put this out. And I think that's a good closing quote. It's, do not let your fire go out. Spark by irreplaceable spark in the hopeless swamps of the not yet, the not quite, and the not at all. Do not let the hero in your soul perish in lonely frustration for the life you deserved and have never been able to reach. The world you desire can be won. It exists. It is real. It is possible, and it's yours. I think that's the message we're trying to get out. That's why we talk about team client community, because it's not just about our team. It's not just about our clients. It's about everybody. It's us being selfish and selfless at the same time. And if we do that, that's truly a people-centric world. So hopefully you found a little inspiration in this one. I think our team did. This is a good one to go into the holidays with, I think, from our team, and appreciate everybody else on our team joining this. And I hope everyone enjoys. Have a happy holiday and figure out how you can bring your light on the world, because it's beautiful and we want to see it, and it will do you well.
Thank you for listening to the People Centered Podcast. We are so grateful for you joining us every week. If you like this content, please like and subscribe. Also, feel free to share on your social media with everyone that you know. It really does help us. If you would like to contact us, I have put our information in the show notes. Please reach out anytime. We love hearing from you. We will be back next week with a new